What's up, guys? It's Armin with PWR. Some of you guys know me as AbsoluteTopUp across some of the websites I play on. And today I'm bringing you guys a video that covers 5 of the biggest spots I've played in the last year or year and a half. Well, I guess it's 5 of the most interesting hands in my top 10. And hopefully it will be enjoyable. If you guys are interested in getting poker coaching from me or some of the other guys who post videos on the channel, check out our website in the description below. With that being said, let's dive right into the hands. So this first one is a hand from the coin poker event at the end of last year, and it looks like I'm playing three-handed with some of the guys who performed really well in the event. I open the button. Let me clear my throat. And Prodigy 3-bets to 13 blinds, and I call. We are like 195 blinds effective, so rather deep. 9-4-4, pretty bricky board, really good board for the out of position player, and he checks. So that's something to think about. You know, probably gonna be mainly ace high, I'd say. I stab a quarter and he calls, so doesn't raise the flop. I think that caps him a little bit. Turns a queen, and I bet 3/4. So at this point, I stabbed small on the flop. Now I'm betting big on a overcard. So I'm pretty much saying I have a queen or better. That's about it. And as far as bluffs go, something with an over, maybe an underpair, flush draws. All those hands are, and straight draws, all those hands are reasonable. And Prodigy's range, you know, gonna be some ace high. Gonna check call some 9x, some check call some ace queen or king queen on the flop, have some underpairs to the 9 as well. And he could have 10s or jacks that he didn't check raise on the flop. Pretty infrequent, but that's kind of what his range looks like. And he calls. River's a 7 of diamonds, so flushes get there. Both players are gonna have flushes, and I think Prodigy's range is mainly now just a 9 or better for the most part, like a 9, 10s, jacks, queens, maybe some ace king. And then my range, well, it kind of depends on what I do, right? So I go all in, and considering the fact that Prodigy could very well have a hand like aces here, or like hand like pocket 9s. But those are hands that aren't going to show up as often. Mainly going to have a queen here or jacks or 10s. But with that being in mind, and I go all in for 1.5x pot almost, I'm basically saying I have a hand that's better than aces. So shoving flushes, boats, and trips for the most part. And could I play a smaller size here? Yeah, maybe. I'm not going to dive too deep into it, but I'm essentially saying I have a hand that's better than aces, and I have bluffs. He calls, and we show down ace-5 of clubs. Not too happy to see a call on my end. And then he shows a hand like ace queen with a diamond, so a very good bluff catcher. Honestly, you can't really get better than that for bluff catchers. And I showed a hand that didn't have a diamond. So some of you guys might be thinking, why did you bluff? You don't have a diamond. Well, I'm not going to talk about it too much, but my perception of what my range looked like pre-flop tells me that I don't have too many hands that have a diamond here that I could bluff with. So this one is an okay candidate to send it in there. So yeah, unfortunate spot, but I think both players played their hand fairly well here. So I will move on to the next one. So this one starts with Prodigy. He just won 20,000 of my dollars in the last hand. Is opening the cutoff, and I 3-bet the button off of 300 big blinds this time. So we're getting pretty deep. So these sessions were probably running pretty long, and players tend to run up stacks, and you end up playing some pretty big pots. He 4-bets pretty large, Mainly going to be kings and aces here, maybe a little bit of queens, and then bluffs, bunch of suited hands, some ace king off, maybe some ace queen off. And my range mainly going to be pocket pairs and some suited broadways. You know, I could have a 5-bet as well, so I'm going to show up with hands that aces and kings a little bit less now that I've called. Flop is king, king 7. It doesn't really get that much better for the pre-flop raiser. You know, they're gonna have ace king a lot and king x a lot in general, so pretty clear range bet for out of position. And they range bet quarter is, well, we don't know if the range betting, but I'd say it's very likely. You see a quarter pot bet, which, you know, it's really small given the SPR, right? So usually SPR is low, you know, you see bet small because not a whole lot more money needs to go in to make it very easy to stack off. Well, in this case, we're pretty deep, so you could see bet larger. I call. My range mainly going to be pocket pairs and some front door and back door draws, maybe some ace high. Turn is a 9 of clubs, so now it's double flush draw and out of position checks. And I stab half pot. I'm pretty much already saying I have trips or better here. Whenever I take this size, you know, maybe I could size down a little. Maybe I could bet third or 40% pot, but this size seems okay. And then, you know, as far as bluffs go, some of the ace high I floated, some of the flush draws I have, and then yes, we're gonna tap into some under pairs, I think, because we bet this size. Let's think about out of position's folding range, you know, obviously give ups like ace high, and then we're looking at like some suited 9x, some suited 7x that aren't doing too well versus a king. I think in game, I thought that hands like pocket tens with like club heart would be doing pretty poorly here, so thought those hands could potentially fold. And prodigy calls, and river's a 10 of hearts, so pretty dynamic river. A lot of things change here. Pocket tens is a boat, king tens a boat, and now the nut flush gets there, so trips gets devalued quite a bit. So he checks, and I go all in. So this is a pretty big all in. We're going all in for 200 big blinds and 184 big blind pot. So I'd say the threshold for your value is way up. And what I mean by that is it is questionable to even go all in with a hand that isn't the nut flush. I would say if you're sitting here with like queen jack of hearts, I wouldn't be too ecstatic, you know. If you go all in here, what's out of position the calling range look like? You know, probably nut flushes. They have kings. They have some low frequency 7s, 9s, 10s. And it's pretty big all in. So what are they really calling? Do they have to call aces, queens, and jacks all too often? You know, probably sometimes, but I'd say even a king could consider folding here. And then for me, I'm pretty much saying, because of that, I'm pretty much saying I have the nut flush or I have a boat. I have a hand like 7s, 9s. I guess I could have kings, you know, or mainly the nut flush. I think that's where my head was at. And I show pocket eights with a heart, so didn't work out again. Probably should stop bluffing. And then prodigy shows ace 9 of hearts, so it's a decent hand to call. You know, you block 9s and technically you chop with value, but you know it's not so straightforward. You know, the fact that you're sitting here with ace 9 of hearts, you're not really beating value, unless if I guess it's not certain that I wouldn't shove worse for value, but I think in theory you're not really beating value. But to fold a hand this strong is pretty assumptive, I'd say. So I think he played his hand pretty well. And for me, I think my hand's pretty much on the cusp. You know, I could bluff. I could be more selective, you know, bluffing like 6s and 5s and 4s, I guess. Those hands don't 3-bet very often. They don't show up in the calling range. So I thought that bluffing this hand on the turn and then bluffing it on the river wouldn't be too bad. And I think I'm not going to go further than that. Unfortunate spot. Moving on. I open the button three-handed with Sea Llama and Barak. And he calls. We are 220 blinds effective. So we get a ace-high two-tone board that's rather connected. You know, there's a lot of draws, a lot of straight draws. And I would say this is a board that being in position doesn't really want to range bet. A lot of hands that don't really perform that well by betting. So he checks and I check back. And interesting turn, a flush completes. Both players should have flushes, and now I don't have as many strong hands because I did check back the flop, but both players should have the nuts in their range. Barak checks, and I stab small. So, you know, a small stab, I could be betting wider than an ace. A pair below an ace is reasonable to bet here for protection or value. And this, if I trap the hand on the flop, now I can start value betting it. And Barak check raises rather large, so he's already saying he has a pretty good hand. I'd say probably set at the worst, and you know, even a set I guess could call here, but I think set, straight, flush for the most part is what we're looking at here. Not really two pair. And I decide to call, and river's a 3, so not much changes. I guess 5-4 gets there. I think out of position could have some 5-4 with a club. That wouldn't be too unusual. And yeah, Barak overbets 1.5x pot. So, you know, at this point, I think he's saying he has a set, straight, or a flush. Even a set's kind of starting to become a little questionable when we bet this big, but I think it's kind of okay. And in my shoes, you know, if I'm sitting here with a hand like ace-10, I'm not really that happy, you know. We kind of just set the value threshold for Barak, and ace-10 would be a bluff catcher here. So if I'm sitting here with ace-10, I'm not too happy. And what I do here is I go all in for pretty much 150 more blinds on top of it. So I'm saying he's saying he had a really good hand. I'm saying I know you have a really good hand, but my hand is a bit better than yours. I think at this point I'm saying I have the nuts or second nuts. And, you know, if I'm saying I have that, anything worse than that is a bluff catcher. If he's sitting here with a jack high flush, that is a sad situation. So obviously I could have a bluff, you know, any hand with like a king or a queen of clubs is a reasonable bluffing candidate. And the showdown we see is queen eight of clubs. You know, I check back the flop and then shoved over the overbet on the river, which, you know, could be deemed questionable. You know, you have to get called by worse. If I could easily be bidding a set or a straight or a worse flush here with, you know, a queen nine flush, but I'm also going all in for 150 more blinds, which means I have to get called by worse. So that means, you know, I have to think he's value betting worse, and also does he call enough with worse hands for it to be worth shoving queen eye flush here? And I'd say in game I thought, yeah, overwhelmingly. So he calls and he shows 9-8 heart diamond. So I think that's a little bit out of line, and I think he might have had a read on what I was doing, but it did not appear to work out for him in this spot. Yeah, I don't think that was a theory approved play, but I think he had his reasons for doing what he did, and I had mine. So that was a good one. Finally in the win column. All right, Jack 10 of diamonds. Diamonds are my favorite suit. This is an ACR hand, it looks like, and I open the cutoff for 2.5 blinds, and Nacho 3 bets, and I 4 bets. So we're around 310 blinds effective. This is 510, or sorry, 50-100. And he calls. You know, Jack 10, not a bad one to 4 bet sometimes. Have some flushes in your range. Have have some more suited hands in your range to make flushes. And speaking of flushes, we flop a flush draw. And the board is 5-4 deuce. I think this is a pretty bricky board. I don't think either player is going to connect much here. Maybe Imposition is going to have a few sets and 2 pairs. But outside of that, it's not enough to make it a bad board for me. I think Imposition, out of position is going to have aces and kings here a whole lot. And Imposition's not going to have that as often. So that justifies, I think you could bet pretty large here. I think you could probably play large of a bet as 75% pot and it'd be reasonable. I bet third, so I go a smaller size here. I think probably larger size is probably better, but all sizes are kind of acceptable here. Ace King's also, ace high is also a gut shot, so more equity for the 4-better's range. Nacho calls. Turn is a flush complete, so flushes get there. Queens turns into a set, which is rather relevant in a spot like this because Queens is going to be more in the in-position player's range. And the fact that the ranges are condensed quite a bit, top of the range is going to show up a lot more. So Queens is going to be a pretty frequent hand here for in-position. The fact that my aces and kings got devalued a bit for out of position, you know, going to be quite a bit of slowing down with my range, and I decide to check. And Nacho chooses a half pot stab, and I guess I could raise, but I decide to call. And turn is a 10 of hearts, pretty bricky, not a lot changes, and Nacho goes all in. Not much else for me to do here than call. I just value, and he shows up with queens. Awesome. Yeah, no, I think well played hand from both. I think queens can be a little close, I guess. I think it's a shove. I think there's enough bluff catchers here for out of position. You know, not overwhelming amount of flushes to where shoving a set here is bad. I think this is a decent play. I think you have to shove, which is pretty toxic whenever you get called by a hand like Jack 10 of diamonds. You could check back the turn a chunk of the time with queens, probably most of the time, I would say, because, you know, having 2 queens stops me from having some bluff catchers that be nice for me to call with whenever in position is value betting. But other than that, nice hand. Lucky for me. All right, let's look at the last hand. Okay, it's a bomb pot on ACR. Looks like it was probably from a while back because it's on one of my older screen names. And looks like we're playing 100-200. Right, bomb pot, and I am in the big blind, it looks like. Yeah, I'm in the big blind. And I stab for 10% pot with a nut gutter and a backdoor flush draw. Get 2 folds, and we see a raise. And 2 folds after that, so now we're heads up. And, you know, I got nut gutter with the backdoor flush draw. Not a whole lot to do other than call. I guess I could 3-bet. And in position's pretty much saying I have trips or bluffs, I would say. So bluffs could be, you know, queen 9, queen jack, jack 9. Probably maybe some under pairs, maybe some queen X or jack X with backdoor flush draw. Wouldn't be too crazy. And I call. Turns a king, so now it is less likely. In position has a value hand. You know, that cuts the amount of value combos down. Or, yeah, it cuts it down a bit. And position bets small. And, you know, I was like, okay, I still beat the bluffs. And still quite a few bluffs here. So I was a little skeptical. You know, so I call. And river's a brick. River's a 6. Not a whole lot changes here. None of the bluffs really get there. And I block some value. I block some offsuit king X. And don't think that's too relevant, but I block it. And in position goes all in for all of it. And I'm sitting there with dick all on the river, just ace high. Nothing much. There's even a chance I could get value bluffed, but I did not think that was going to happen, and the player in this hand did a skeptical thing not too long ago, within like last 5 to 10 minutes, if I recall correctly. So I was a little bit more interested in putting my money in to see what he had. So I clicked the call button and I got shown Queen 9 offsuit. So good pot, good result. I was very happy. Actually, it's kind of interesting. On the river here, I was pretty like emotionally detached from the hand because, you know, you're sitting on the river here and the player goes on for $17,000 in an $18,000 pot. So I pretty much like, yeah, this money's gone, right? So I wasn't really, I kind of detached myself from the money and made the best decision I thought I could. So I called and, you know, I was right, but I did not react one bit. So I pretty much did not think I was winning this whenever I did not like, I don't know how to describe it. I was like ready to lose it all. So once I didn't, it kind of didn't make a difference. So it felt great. It felt great, I guess, in hindsight, but I didn't initially react after I called and won. Yeah, those were 5 of the more exciting big pots I played in the last year and a half, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Yeah, so you know, if you guys enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe, and if you guys want coaching, website's down in the description below. And peace out. Thank you guys.